Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions co-host and moderator.
And I'm Erin Palmer, Team Rayceen Productions co-host and moderator.
Joining us is Christopher Kane. Hi, Christopher.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we talk about your new role as White House reporter for the Washington Blade, please tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background and who you are.
Sure, happy to. I moved to Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago. And when I first got here, I was doing communication and PR for some large NGOs, including medical and major medical society. And my reporting career started at the Blade. I began freelancing for the Los Angeles Blade, the Washington Blade sister publication, before transitioning into covering antitrust and business for a major global financial news outlet. I was covering the Justice Department, Federal Trade Commission, and especially focusing on multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions that were under review by the government. So from there, I transitioned to modern healthcare, where I was covering Congress. I was there briefly before I received an offer to be the White House correspondent at the Washington Blade. The kind of offer that you can't really turn down as a reporter. So jump shipped over here in November. So.
Awesome. So as you said, in November, you became the new White House reporter for the Blade. Now, own the only credentialed LGBTQ media outlet in the briefing room. That is huge. Please, tell us about getting the position, being in the press pool, and how the experience overall has been thus far.
Sure. So as you said, it's tremendously important to have an LGBTQ outlet in the room. I said recently I was interviewed on Good Morning Washington, and there are only 49 chairs in the James S. Brady press briefing room. So it's far from a guarantee that there is an LGBTQ outlet in the room, and it's tremendously important to hold any administration accountable for how its policies are impacting LGBTQ Americans. But my experiences in the press pool have been, I have to say, so far a little bit limited, because much of my attention has been on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue at the Capitol. So I've spent more time in person at the Capitol than I have at the White House so far. Now I expect that to change, but I have had some actually some very interesting experiences in the press pool. So do you think it would be helpful if I explained a bit about how the press pool works?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. So the Washington, D.C. press pool for the White House, essentially it works. The reporters that cover the White House are on a rotation. So it's once a month, the assigned reporter has to go to the White House and, effectively, if the president is in the White House, spend all day there, cover any breaking news on behalf of the entire White House Correspondents Association, all of the other White House reporters, and everybody who reads the pool updates. This can be really interesting and unpredictable. So, for instance, but my last time doing the press pool was on February 3rd, and the president made totally unscheduled, unplanned remarks about the January jobs report. So it was, it was a bit stressful. We were outside for a while. It was really cold out, and then you get into the South Lawn, or I'm sorry, can't remember the name of the room, but anyway, you get into the room. You're really close to the president and trying to take down everything that he says, and it's really important to get it right. And then just hours later, I was covering the president's departure. He was headed to Philadelphia. And the other reporters were shouting questions at him, and I had to take down what they were saying. And this was, again, February 3rd. It was the day that the Chinese spy balloon was first identified over Montana. I, however, because I was at the White House all day and I hadn't, I guess, been on Twitter, I had missed the news about the balloon. So these other reporters are shouting, "Mr. President, what about the balloon? What are you going to do about the balloon?" And I'm like, "What balloon? What are they talking about?" So, I mean, they're Googling on my phone balloon, like, so it could be unpredictable, but exciting.
It all seems very fast paced. Have you had the opportunity to interview members of Congress, and has that given you any insight about Republicans controlling the House or anything like that?
Yeah, so I actually, one of my first interviews was with Nancy Pelosi shortly after she'd stepped down from House leadership. And we discussed her remarkable career and legacy, and the impact that she's had as a legislator on LGBTQ policy, as well as a bunch of other areas. And, we had a discussion. A lot of my questions were focused on working with Republican members. Nobody certainly is more of an authority on that than she. And she's one of a handful of members that I've interviewed since starting in this role. And it's always exciting to talk to members of Congress, especially when they have a unique perspective, which is certainly, of course, the case with the former House Speaker. And as well as some members that I'm interviewing last week and this week who were just elected. So obviously the questions are very different, but it's always an interesting experience for sure.
Certainly. Now, there's all kinds of news, of course, always coming out of the White House, coming out of federal agencies and all of that. What kind of news usually, like you perk up and say, like, this one will most impact LGBTQ Americans either directly or indirectly?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question because, the news is happening all the time. So, of course, you have things like, Congress earlier this month, the last month, introduced a bill that would prohibit transgender student athletes from participating in athletics at the school level under Title IX. So this is something that, as I said, is coming through Congress, but it's also, policies governing Title IX can be made at the executive level as well, through executive action. And we're seeing, news made on the agency level, the FDA's relaxation of its ban on gay and bisexual men donating blood. That was a huge development. And then of course there are policies at the White House level that that don't explicitly target LGBTQ Americans, but that impact us just like they do everyone else. Student loan forgiveness, there's a million examples of that. So.
And are you seeing anything that jumps out at you in terms of pending or proposed or likely legislative action that might impact LGBTQ folks?
So there's a lot, and forgive me because I'm afraid that I'm going to forget about a few things happening in Congress. The one that I just mentioned certainly is a big one. We're seeing efforts to define transgender people out of existence. It's really scary times, really, and this is something we're really seeing more of at the state level. Some extreme anti-trans policies that are being pushed through and that have a realistic chance of success. In states from Florida to Texas to just across
Tennessee.
the country.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee recently, definitely. Yep.
Definitely. Well, speaking of these bills that are going through that are being, pushed to kind of stifle and stymie LGBTQ Americans, we learned that you were recently at a place where all the people that love doing that were at, and that, of course, is CPAC. So please tell us a little bit about your experience attending CPAC this year.
Oh, geez. It was certainly interesting. I don't really know what I was expecting. But there were all kinds of people there. So you had, the type of people that you would expect to show up at like a Federalist Society event, people that are really buttoned up, that are kind of part of the establishment. And then you had a lot of people who certainly did not fit that mold. In terms of the guests, the people who had booths, or the groups that had that had booths that were selling merchandise or running interviews and that kind of thing, excuse me, what were also fairly interesting and diverse. The first session that I attended at CPAC was about the media, and there were a lot of really barbed comments. I mean, one of the speakers said about the press, these are really unimpressive, unintelligent people. And then he pointed at the box where we were all sitting and said, I hope you're getting all of this. It was very, very combative. And this is the attitude with which a lot of the speakers were approaching every subject they were talking about. It was very combative. Certainly it was evident they were trying to gin up the attendees.
Mm.
Christopher, for viewers who may not be familiar, can you explain briefly what CPAC is?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have started there. So CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Conference. It's held annually, most of the time in DC, although for the past, I think from 2021 to 2022, it was in Florida, and then maybe anyway. So it's a gathering of the most high profile figures on the right. So you have members of Congress that were speaking. I saw Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Rick Scott, Ted Cruz, J.D. Vance. So people from the House and the Senate. Former President Trump spoke on Saturday. I watched that through a live stream. They're not in person. Presidential candidate Nikki Haley spoke. Rumored or perhaps expected presidential candidate, I don't believe he was announced yet, although it could be wrong. Oh geez, I just forgot his name. But Mike Pompeo also spoke. So it's essentially the most, as I said, the most high profile figures on the right, and and the attendees and exhibitors.
And I have to ask how you deal with an environment where the press is maybe not treated respectfully or as a group of people that add value to discussion and debate around issues. I mean, that's a pretty stark example that you just gave us about being called out like that. So how do you deal with that when you're there and otherwise?
Thank you. I appreciate that question because it's really interesting. On the one hand, of course, you never want to be a part of the story, and so I'll also say, like, the folks who covered many of these Trump rallies that where actual violence did happen experienced certainly a lot more than I have, attending an event like CPAC. I would say it's mostly just you have to hold firm to your commitment to not be a part of the story, to not make the story about you, and to not allow the way that you're treated filter into or color your reporting and the way that you frame things.
Interesting. Well, it's really nice to speak with you. Please tell our viewers how they can keep up with you, what you're working on, and stay in touch and read your work.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation as well. So you can follow me on Twitter at Chris_Kane_, it's my last name, Kane. And then the Washington Blade on Twitter is at Washblade, WASHBLADE. Certainly follow us on Instagram. I think we both have the same handle on Instagram. Just keep checking the Washington Blade. We're putting up content and new content virtually every day. So
awesome. To our viewers, the links will be in the description, so go ahead and check that out. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and keep up the good work. Thanks so much.
Likewise, it was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. To those watching, please follow Team Rayceen on social media.
And click around our YouTube channel. Check out our other interviews, vlogs, forums, and more. While you're there, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, viewers, Thank you for watching.